Welcome back to part 2 of our CI/CD using CircleCI and GCP or Google Cloud Platform. So hopefully you guys already watched part 1. If you haven't, check out the link in the description below because it's definitely going to make part 2 make a lot more sense. Trust me. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe below. Otherwise, we're going to get right into it. We are deploying our production site today. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to CircleCI, and you can see I've been messing around with like the main branch and everything, but we're starting fresh. I can't delete this stuff, so don't worry about it too much. But we have our dev branch deployed from last time, and what we want to do is we want to first go into our project settings, and we want to go ahead and add some environment variables. So we have our node env environment. Let me go ahead and just delete that. We don't need a node env. Actually, node env is added automatically by Google Cloud, and so what we want to do is we actually want to just create, if we want to set our environment, let's go ahead and just set something called env. So we're going to go ahead and just make an environment variable called env, and then we're going to overwrite this in our production environment variables. Now, one of the things that we have to do is that we want to overwrite our service key and we want to overwrite our project ID as well, because we have two different projects. We have our project for our dev, and then we have our project for our production service. Now, our app service is going to be default for both. Maybe you have a different service for production, probably not. So you probably wouldn't have to do this, but the way that it's going to do is it's actually going to load these project level environment variables, and it's going to overwrite any variable of the same name at the organization level for your production variables, right? And so let's go ahead and we're going to go to organization settings, and what we're going to do is create a context. So this context, let's go ahead and call it Covalent CircleCI. You can call it whatever you want, but we're going to create this context, and we're going to pop into that context, and we're going to look at the environment variables here. So we want to create our environment variables. The first one that we want to overwrite is going to be that env, and we're going to say production. Hopefully I spelled that right. Let's see, at least the last part of it is TION. And we're also going to overwrite our project ID, right? So we want to make sure that we grab the exact same name, so Google Project ID, and we're going to grab that right from here. This is our production project. I'm going to paste that in, and we're going to also add the environment variable gcloud service key. Now, we actually have to create this gcloud service key, so let's go ahead and pop back into the IAM. Make sure you also enable your API for this. Now, I already came in here and did all this, so I didn't want to take up too much time, but you go to library, you would look up exactly the same thing that you did for your dev project, right, where you enable the App Engine Admin API. Now let's go ahead and go to service accounts here, and we're going to create our service account, and let's just call it CircleCI, create and continue, select role. We're going to do editor here. Actions viewer, I'm pretty sure I clicked editor, but okay. And then another role that we could add, App Engine Deployer here. This is actually a role that we do need. Now, there is an order of operations gcloud. I do find a bug every now and then, and I believe there is an issue when you create a service account after you create the App Engine. You probably do have to add this role. I would add this role anyway. So if you get any errors from the dev side of things, for whatever reason, I didn't need to add it. I got it done with just editor for some reason, but App Engine Deployer will also give you the roles that you need to deploy this, right? So let's go ahead and continue, and then we don't need to grant access. So for whatever reason, I do feel that like they might grant you access to that, to all editors when you create the App Engine after you create the service account. But because of that, let's go ahead and just make sure that we have the proper permissions, so we added the different roles, right? So let's jump into the service account real quick, and we are going to go to keys, and we want to add a key, create new key, and we're going to use the JSON format. So it's going to automatically download this to your computer. Now let's see, our key is 5F, all right? And we are going to go into VS Code real quick, and I'm going to grab this key file that we just downloaded, and I'm going to just kind of throw it in here. We don't need that, but what we do need is we need a bash terminal. So it opens up PowerShell, of course. Let's do get bash. Delete that PowerShell one, and we're going to run our command, right, where we're going to put the file in, and we're going to turn it into base64. Now remember, -W is for Windows. For Mac, it's something different. I think it might be -B. B as in boy. Again, I'm not sure. I know that that's probably small for you guys. I don't think I can zoom into this particular piece, but again, that's just cat, the name of the file, the vertical pipe, base64, -W for Windows. For Mac, I would just look up the cat command and find out what the flags are and just look at the equivalency of -W. And then 0 is the last piece. So that's going to convert your key to base64. You're going to want to copy that, and then we're going to go back in here. We're going to paste that value, and we're going to add the environment variable. So these environment variables are going to overwrite the environment variables from the first part, and we should be good to go ahead and now update our config file. So let's pop open the code again. We'll go ahead and just remove this for now. Open up our config file. Also, we can delete our key too, so we don't want that. We don't want to check that in. All right, so we have our config file up here. Now we have our jobs. Now we want to add a job. So let's go ahead and we're going to just copy this entire deploy job here just to make sure that we get the spacing and everything correct, because I know that gave us some issues last time. And we're going to actually call it promote. So this is going to be our promote job. We don't actually need to check out any code. So we are still working in the same Docker image, but we don't need a directory. We don't need to actually check out any code. So that doesn't really matter. And we're not going to be creating any app.yaml. So we are going to be using the same gcloud command though. So we are going to want to run this command itself. Now we're going to do everything else in post steps. So now we can go down to our workflows, and we're going to use the same deploy workflow because it's still all just the same thing. We're still just deploying, right? And so we have our deploy staging. We want to actually add a deploy production. Now we still want to run our tests, so we want to require the test still. You may require more. You may require additional tests for deploying to prod. But what we're going to do is we're still going to deploy the app, but we're going to add an additional flag that's called no promote. All right, let's zoom in a little bit for you. So --no-promote. And what this means is tells gcloud, or it tells GCP that we do not want to migrate traffic immediately, right? And so with dev, it doesn't really matter. It's going to immediately migrate traffic. It should automatically stop the previous version when it migrates traffic, right? And so that's basically the promotion process. But with production, we don't want to automatically promote. We want to have a validation step. We want to make sure that somebody looks at that instance, while it's working, and make sure that it isn't, there's not an error. We're not going to crash our servers. We're not going to deploy something to live production. We're not going to deploy something to our live production site that doesn't work, right? And so we want to be able to look at it before we migrate all the traffic. So we're still going to be hitting our old instance until we check and verify. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to add, I don't need this up yet. We are going to add an additional approval process. All right, and so what that looks like is, again, we need to just make sure that we change that to be main too. We don't want to do this on dev. We want to do this on our main branch, right? So that's kind of obvious. But again, we also want to add one additional thing here, and that's called a context, and that's the context that we created. So we want to make sure we use the name that we used over here, and we're going to put this in quotes, and that's going to be our context. So that's the context that's going to overwrite the environment variables and pass in the new things that we need. Now, going back to our actual approval process underneath here, you can go ahead and copy this, but it's basically going to be in line with our deploy job here. It's a special job of type approval, all right? So it doesn't actually have to match any job from up here, whereas deploy and promote do, right? So this deploy itself has to match a job from up above, but this approved prod does not, all right? So this is a type approval. It's a special type of job, and it's going to be in our deploy workflow, right? So if you wanted to change, you could change this to be something else if you don't want to, have the job and the workflow name the same thing. So that's a little bit confusing again, but it does work and it works fine. So again, that's our approved prod. And what we want to do is require deploy prod so that when deploy prod runs, approved prod is going to kick off as part of this step, right? And so it's basically just an approval step. And that's how CircleCI kind of links it together, is that it sees that it's dependent on deploy prod. Deploy prod runs when we push to main. And now the last step is going to be what runs after we approve this, right? And so that's going to be our promotion. Now, what we want to do is we can go ahead and we can just kind of copy this deploy here, and we're going to change it to be promote. Now this promote matches our job from up here. So this is going to go ahead, it's going to use the Cloud SDK, it's going to initialize it, and we're going to still use the same context, right? And then that's going to use the environment variables that we need. And for post steps, instead of deploying the app, we're actually going to just migrate traffic. So we're going to go ahead and use a command that's a gcloud app command. So it's not app deploy, it's going to be app services, and we want to set traffic to the service that we define, which is just default. And we're going to split basically to 100%, so that's the 100% here. So we want to split it to be 100, but we want to make sure that the instance that we're splitting is going to be, we're going to list the versions and we're going to sort by last deployed time, right? So basically the latest deployed version, we are going to set to be 1. So again, that's going to migrate all the traffic to the latest deployed, the last deployed version, right? So again, there's obviously isn't perfect. This definitely works, but if you start deploying multiple pushes to prod, you might get some issues with this without actually, approving or denying. Now you probably want to have some sort of denial process too, but that's going to be going extra. We're doing happy path today just to make sure that I don't bore the heck out of you guys. So again, we're going to have one more run step here, and that's going to be to stop the previous version. Because if we migrate all the traffic and we don't stop the previous version and we keep pushing to prod, we're going to have way too many instances running. And so we need to just run the previous version, because gcloud actually doesn't actually like stopping multiple versions. So we're just going to stop a single version. It's obviously going to be a slightly different command. So again, I hope you guys can kind of see this. I'll zoom in a little bit further, but gcloud app version stop, and it's going to target the service, and then it's going to list the versions, or the traffic split is equal to 0. So all of the stopped, or basically all the versions that aren't receiving any traffic, it's going to sort by last deploy time, and then it's going to actually grab that value as the ID. So that's going to grab this ID, and it's going to stop that version. So that's the final thing we have to do. Make sure you can always go in and manually stop it as well, but you definitely want to stop that. Otherwise, you're going to end up hitting your instance quota, and it's not going to work. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add this requires, and it just requires approved prod, and then that's the final link in the chain. So when we actually approve this and it's true, then it is going to promote. All right, so we should be good. It looks nice, and we should be good to go ahead and push this now. And if we go ahead and save this and then open up our terminal, we can start by pushing to dev. And we're going to just say adding production, push, and then we're going to want to check out main. We're going to merge dev, and then we're going to push. Of course, one thing I didn't even realize I forgot to put an environment variable in here. So how are we going to actually know when our main and our production are running, right? So we need to actually know if main and production are going to have any differences, right? And so what we can actually do is we can set an environment variable here, env variables, and we want to say env, and that's going to be our env variable here. So just like we're setting the service here, we can also set our environment variables. So our environment variable env. And then what we can do is we can actually go ahead and do the router.get, and we can say API/env, and then we'll just res.json process.env.env. All right. And so when we actually hit this API endpoint in dev, it should say development. In prod, it should say production. And we should be good to check out dev again. And we'll commit here. We'll say adding environment variables. And then we should just immediately check out dev again. All right, so let's go ahead. We might have just totally screwed up CircleCI, but let's go ahead and kind of go back, and we're gonna check out what our pipeline looks like. Unable to parse YAML, so we need to fix something. Name deploy prod. All right, so we have some errors. Clearly didn't copy something correctly. Let's see, promote. There's something in here. Deploy staging, deploy prod. Let's see, that's lined up. Post steps, filters on main. All right, so we got to figure out what it doesn't like. Everything seems to be okay. It didn't like something on this line though. Let's see. Found duplicate key requires. Oh. That's the issue. All right, so it was a copy issue because we copied deploy. Basically in here, this promote step, we don't actually need the requires test because we're requiring it up here. And the only way that we can get to this is through this approval chain. And so it didn't like this. This should actually fix that. And so we just need to remove that requires test because the requires test was twice. All right, so that was a copy paste error. Let's go ahead, and that's why you can't always copy paste. It's always better just to write everything, you know, fresh, but because I was doing it for time's sake and not to, you know, bore the heck out of you guys, we messed up. But again, all right, git commit, fixing YML error. All right, and then let's check out main. And then check out dev again. All right, now let's parse back. Let's see. Hopefully this actually fixes it. Which is the name of, all right, job approve prod requires deploy prod, which is the name of two other jobs in workflow deploy. Did I copy? I must have. All right, this zoomed in thing is really messing with me here. Oh, that's the problem. We named this. Again, same copy paste error. You guys probably saw that before I did. Sorry about that. All right, so this name, the promote doesn't need a name. It's just going to be called promote. You could name it something if you wanted to, but that is not, you know, an issue. We just wanted to call this, again, always got to worry about the copy paste. So copy paste error. Okay, after way too many mistakes, we should have this thing working now. All right, so we do. We have dev and main running now. This is where I'm going to cut out some of the time, and we are going to fast forward here and just, I'll see you right now. All right, so you can see that we had the deployment success on dev, and then on main, we actually have something on hold. This failed. I messed something up. Don't worry too much about it. It shouldn't appear on yours. I had to rerun it. only because I was deleting things to kind of clean stuff up, and I deleted the wrong thing and it caused it to fail. So again, this won't happen on yours. If it does happen, let me know, if you can debug the issue, let me know what actually happened, or let me know what the error says, and we'll definitely help you out as best we can. But basically, you should get this on hold issue here. So if we click into this, you can see the pipeline here. It ran through test, it went through deploy prod, and now we're actually on approve prod. So if we go to our CircleCI dashboard, or the CircleCI in GCP, we can go down to App Engine and we can kind of see what we're dealing with here. So if we go to versions, now I deployed something before, and so it is, it currently is serving this version here, right, which is the last version, right? So this is what's in production currently. So if you're doing this for the first time, you're only gonna have one version, you just promote it, you won't have anything here, but basically, in this particular case, I wanted to kind of show you how this works generally, and so I made sure I deployed a version first. So we have two versions serving, and this one has 0 traffic, but you can go ahead and see that we are able to look at it, we're able to pull it up, but nothing's actually being routed to it right now, right? And so if you actually look at the URL, you have a URL that kind of looks like this, .circleci. If you went into settings and you actually set a custom domain, obviously all of your custom domain traffic would be going to this version here, which you can actually see is the default just project.uw.art.appspot, right? So when you go to this one, you can actually see it's the version name .circleci. So that's how they kind of do the versioning, right? Is they put the version ID in here. It's probably too small for you guys to see, but basically it's the version number .circleci, whereas this one is just the project number .uw.art, UW being the region, and then appspot.com being their domain name, right? So again, we are serving status-wise both of these, but the traffic is only going towards, this is your actual production value right here. So once you kind of look and you see, okay, we're working, you test it thoroughly, the admin would come in here, maybe a product manager, whoever's actually doing this would go in here and they'd want to approve prod. So we'd actually approve this. All right, so now that we're approved, we go into the promote stage. And this promote stage is going to, again, it's going to make sure that permissions, it's going to authenticate, and then it's going to start changing this, right? It's going to route all the traffic to this version here, and then it's going to stop this version here. So again, we are going to kind of watch this. We can see that traffic was migrated successfully, but now we're actually stopping the previous version. So if we go in here and we refresh, we can actually see that traffic is now completely working here. We are currently stopping this, right? Which it is still working through this right now. Google will eventually give this confirmation that it is stopped and we'll have a successful deployment. But again, it's actually currently stopping this. It's not letting us know this because it is being done programmatically. But we can now see that this latest version is the URL. That would be a custom domain if you had a custom domain. Otherwise, it's the primary AppSpot URL that's given to your default project. And when it's the default version that's actually live. So it's been promoted successfully. If we come in here and we go to /API/env, we can see that we get the production value. And if we go to our CircleCI dev, we can see that we have that instance running, it is serving. We have all of our other versions stopped because it automatically promoted and automatically stopped our versions. We can go ahead and take a look at this. It looks the same. But if we actually say /API/env, you can see that it is development and we are getting the right variables. Oh, let me zoom in. Yep, that's definitely development. And then if we zoom into the production, it's definitely production. So again, we now see that everything is working correctly. We have our development variables being deployed to the devs project, and we have our production variables being deployed to the production site. So we will go ahead and chalk that up as a win. All right, so hopefully that was easy enough. Hopefully it made sense. I know there was a couple mishaps in there. Don't worry about it too much. I don't think you should encounter any of the issues. A lot of the issues come from just the recording process and having to do something and then revert it. So again, if you encounter anything, everything that we did in this video should work first try. If something comes up or if there is an error, definitely post it, post some screenshots, post a comment, whatever you can, send us it. and we will make sure that we figure it out, because it can be a little finicky, but for the most part, it works pretty well. But spent a lot of time in GCP, and honestly, it's my favorite platform. Not being paid by them. Hopefully someday they do. But again, it is a great platform, and CircleCI seems to work pretty well for the continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment with the platform. So again, if you have any other questions, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, comment below, like our channel, and check out our merch store. All in the links below. See you soon.